Welcome to SolarWorks for Illinois. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Today, my guest is Will Kenworthy, Regulatory Director Midwest for Vote Solar, where he's responsible for shaping and guiding regulatory and legislative policies to advance markets and programs for solar power in the Midwest. Welcome to SolarWorks for Illinois, Will.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Really grateful for all of your work. You're somebody who has been in the trenches in the solar industry, working for an EPC, working for your own venture, right? Developing software. So you have a breadth and depth of knowledge that we can all benefit from. And of course, it's very heady days here in Illinois. We're all sitting on the edge of our seats, waiting for some new clean energy legislation to break the ice on what is the pending funding cliff, which we can touch on. There is some good news on that front with Governor Pritzker's report. But Will, why don't we just start off with some background on yourself? Give our listeners the Cliff Notes version of how you came to where you are.
Sure. Okay. So I guess I started in solar. I've been in energy policy for my whole career, back to working in Washington, D.C. In the early 90s on the Clean Air Act. And then stayed in energy policy for a long time, but then got involved with solar in, I think, 2010 with a very small startup in Ohio, back when Ohio was just cresting in terms of its RPS policy, and did it for a while, moved to Chicago in 2014, started with a company here in Chicago that was trying to get into the market from another part of the Midwest, and did that for a couple of years, did a one-year hiatus with a Internet of Things, industrial energy efficiency software thing for 1 year, and then ended up back with Microgrid, which was the predecessor for Pivot Energy, and then had this opportunity with Vote Solar back in 2018, and it was a perfect fit for my interest in energy policy and sort of the breadth of what was going on in the Midwest at the time. And the Midwest is a transitional and great opportunity for renewable energy and clean energy. And so I was excited to join Vote Solar back in 2018. So I've been doing that ever since.
Great. And I know Vote Solar as a California nonprofit that got involved in the California market. Of course, California is the most mature solar market, in case anybody doesn't know that. And it is truly a mature market where there's now pull-through from consumers. Consumers are just diving into solar headlong. And here in the Midwest, things are different, though. So give us the overview of your work at Vote Solar, and I'd love you to tease apart the distinction between regulatory and legislative work that Vote Solar does.
Yeah, so let me just back up a little bit and talk about Vote Solar first, and then I'll talk about what John and I do. So Vote Solar is a nonprofit advocacy organization. We have members, but not corporate members. We're not a trade association, and our mission is expanding clean energy and doing it in a way that ensures equity and access for all communities that have been left behind in the transition to clean energy. So that's basically what we're doing. And as you mentioned, we started off in California in the early 2000s, and have been expanding ever since, and really became involved in the Midwest in, I think, about 2016, when my predecessor, Becky Stanfield, started with Vote Solar, and we began a very deliberate expansion and trying to get involved in what's going on in the Midwest. And the reason we did that was because, we saw that the Midwest was beginning to have the conditions necessary for distributed generation to be successful and for utility scale generation to start to make inroads, and the economics crossing that tipping point into viability for around the region. The way we're organized is generally in a campaigns organization and a regulatory organization. So I'm on the regulatory side, and almost all of my work is involved in the regulatory side of of the business. I intervene in rate cases and integrated resource plans all around the region. And I have a partner here in the Midwest, John Delury, who I think is going to be talking with you soon here, and
Yes,
he
indeed.
handles the campaigns. So that's all of the working with organizations, working with other NGOs, and working on the legislative side primarily. So between that, we cover the whole Midwest. John and I cover the whole Midwest. We focus on 3 states. There's 3 states that we're officially focused on, which is Illinois, Minnesota, and Michigan. But I've gotten involved in proceedings in other states as well.
So the analogy I just thought of to further distinguish regulatory versus legislative, the legislative piece is building the airport so that you can have air traffic. And the regulatory piece is making sure that the airplane actually flies safely. It's one thing to get a 25% RPS like we have in Illinois, or 100% RPS like they have in Wisconsin, but it's another thing to then fulfill that and actually make it happen in the market. It takes all kinds of rules and regulations, and then of course market forces to really create a renewable energy economy. And we have in Illinois fits and starts of that, right? A major start with FEJA. Our RPS was broken prior to FEJA. We were not going to achieve 25% by 2025. It's still a question. Will we achieve 25% by 2025? But things are looking up with the new report from Governor Pritzker. But what are your priorities in the Midwest, Will?
So, like I said, we spend our time in those three states. Illinois, I think is the greatest potential opportunity for clean energy in the Midwest right now, just because of its size and our starting point. We're starting from not very significant penetration of either distributed generation or utility scale solar in the state. But we're a big state, and there's a huge opportunity there. And there's also demand for it, right? With the election of Governor Pritzker, we have a Democratic leadership who's said since his election, since the campaign, that he was interested in doing this and moving clean energy forward. And this looks to be the time to do it now. I mean, we've got we had some setbacks politically with the scandals that were going on with the utilities, with the utility specifically, and that was unnecessary. But hopefully we're sort of got our feet under us again, and can move forward now that the governor's put a stake in the ground and started pulling everyone along with him so he can catch up with the rest of the Midwest. I mean, things have happened pretty quickly in the Midwest. Before COVID, you had in Michigan, you had the governor leading forward and is working very hard on a carbon program that hopefully she'll move forward with in Michigan once we get our feet under us after the pandemic. You've got some serious action going on, and another very similar you've had commitments in Minnesota from the governor, and also hopefully some legislative support for what the governor is proposing to do. You've had the new governor of Wisconsin make some commitments on carbon. And so Governor Pritzker's got some catching up to do with the rest of the region.
We may as well just share with our listeners the report that I referred to. I'm going to share my screen here. On the 20th of August, the governor's office released a report, excuse me, called Putting Consumers and Climate First. If you just search on that title and then illinois.gov, you will find the report. It's an 8-point report. I'm not going to go through all of it right now, but there's it's no accident that Section 1 is strengthen utility company transparency and ethics requirements. Knock, knock, ComEd. There is a major scandal that is still unfolding in Illinois, and that's related to dirty money in politics, basically, and analogous to what's going on in Ohio. Now, the good news here is that there's major points on renewable energy here on point 3, make Illinois a renewable energy leader and phase out dirty power. We have a lot of work ahead of us. While we have a 25% RPS, and now the governor's putting a stake in the ground with a 100% RPS by 2050. So that is really wonderful news. We've been waiting with bated breath, right, for that to become a priority. And of course, those of us near and dear to the industry have wanted 100% RPS for a long time, because that gives us runway. It gives us the energy transition, right? That's the goal, is how do we avoid catastrophic climate change? All of the scientists are unanimously in agreement that this is an existential threat. It's happening. I'm not going to go into all the details on that. If you just Google that or YouTube it, right, there's a ton of wonderful content about how serious this is. This is an all hands on deck moment for humanity. And of course, we are local animals in local ecosystems. And so we need to work on Illinois. And my next question for you, though, Will, is, since you described Illinois as one of the best states for renewable energy, why do you say that? And before FEJA and after FEJA, I guess, how have things improved, and what are the challenges that you have been working on day in and day out?
Well, I think so. FEJA was a fantastic start for getting us on this track to doing this clean energy transition that we want to do, right? FEJA got us started. We had the initial blocks of the adjustable block program last year. There was a couple of very large, significant utility scale procurements for renewable energy. And so, we got a good start. What we ran into a funding wall, right? And so we needed to do something legislatively to keep the ball rolling. I'm optimistic about it, and I know that we're gonna pass legislation in Illinois because the stars are aligned. Like, it's in everyone's interest. The governor wants to see it. The advocates want to see it, and the industry wants to see it, and frankly, consumers want to see it. And in this market that we're in, clean energy is the cheapest option, and we can talk about other states later. But in other states where resource planning is done by utilities that look at lowest cost, system options, clean energy is winning, right? If the utilities ask the question, what's the cheapest way for us to serve our customers? Clean energy is winning consistently everywhere in the region. and this is not just California, it's not just Arizona and Florida, it's happening in the Midwest right now. So, we need to, in a competitive state like Illinois, in a state with a competitive electric supply, it's a little bit trickier to get the energy supply transition done, because it has to win. Renewable energy, clean energy has to win in the context of competitive markets, and those competitive markets have been set up to favor fossil generation at this point, and so we need to do something to recognize the real economic value of clean energy in the competitive states.
Yes, it boils down to the value of energy. And tease apart, though, for us, if you would, the difference between Illinois and, say, Michigan, or Illinois and Minnesota when it comes to resource planning, so to speak, and how energy finds its way to consumers.
Yeah, so maybe just a little background. So traditional vertically integrated utilities in Michigan and Indiana, virtually everywhere in the Midwest except for Illinois and Ohio, all those other states are vertically integrated states. And in those states, a utility has a franchise service territory, and they provide not just the distribution of the electricity distribution services, which is what ComEd and Ameren do now here in Illinois. In the other states, they also are responsible for getting the energy resources online, so the generation, and to different extents. In Michigan and Minnesota, they have very formal, very strict, not strict, but very formal, very well-defined processes for how the utility makes its plans to get generation to serve its customers for the long term. These are usually 15 or 20-year plans. And so the utility makes this integrated resource plan that's based on very sophisticated modeling of what their existing portfolio is, and then what the options are for them going forward. And they will come up with a plan that says in 2024, we're going to, add X amount of generation, and we're going to retire, X amount of generation, and we're going to, and they do that for the next, 20 years. So in 20 or 15 or 20 years. So for example, Vectren Energy in Indiana just filed their resource plan, and they said, okay, we're going to retire 740 megawatts of coal generation. Vectren, for those who don't know, is in Evansville, Indiana. It's the very heart of the Illinois coal basin. They said, we're going to retire 740 megawatts of coal and replace it with 1.2 or 1.1 gigawatts of solar plus storage, because that's the cheapest thing for our customers going forward. That's the cheapest and most reliable way for us to provide energy for our customers. So that's how they do it in vertically integrated states.
And so, for example, if Exelon, who owns a fleet of nuclear power plants in Illinois, we're the most nuclearized state in the United States. If they decided to do a similar thing and transition their assets to wind, solar, and storage, what does it take for them to do that? And how is that different than that IRP process that Minnesota and Wisconsin and Indiana are going through?
So in the PJM states, right? So in the states that are part of the PJM interconnect, almost all of them are competitively supplied energy. So that's Northern Illinois. There are a couple of little parts of Indiana that are in PJM, but are still vertically integrated. So like Indiana Michigan Power Company in northeastern Indiana is PJM, but they're not in the competitive market. But then all of Ohio, all of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland. So those states that are in PJM, they if you're generating electricity there, you're selling it to someone else. You're not selling it to someone who is making resource plans in the same way that a vertically integrated utility is under the guidance of a commission, right? So Exelon selling their electricity to First, one thing is that they're competing in these procurements that the Illinois Power Agency does for the default supply of the distribution utility. So ComEd and Ameren are, if you're a customer of ComEd or Ameren, you have a choice of whether or not to go with the default utility electric supply or whether you use a competitive retail electric supplier. And in Illinois at this point, if you're ComEd customers, for example, residential customers, somewhere between 30% and a half of residential customers, I think, are still on default supply from ComEd. But at the industrial level, at the commercial and industrial customers are almost exclusively, it's in the like 80 to 85% of customers, and even more than that of load for the very large customers are with competitive electric suppliers. So for the default supply for ComEd and Ameren, the Illinois Power Agency was set up to procure electricity to serve those customers. And ComEd, I don't know who is who wins those competitive retail electric, or those procurements from the IPA. We don't have very much visibility into that, but I think it's probably safe to say that Exelon is getting its share of that business, and so they're probably supplying a bunch of energy to IPA for the default supply. But there's also a number of other competitors who are merchant electric generators who are participating in that market. And then the other sort of outlet for generators in PJM, for merchant generators in PJM, is the competitive retail electric suppliers who are serving these other customers. So if you're with a competitive retail electric supplier in Illinois, you have to get that energy that you're providing to your customers from somewhere, and so they can do that two ways. There's a market, a pretty robust market for energy and capacity in PJM that retail electric suppliers can procure energy from, and there's also bilateral contracts that they can make with merchant generators. And so again, we don't have very much visibility into that. It's very competitive information, and so the retail electric suppliers, procure their energy somewhere, and that's through either merchant generators or through the market, PJM markets.
PJM is Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland. The grid is divided into these regional, what are called ISOs. In Illinois, we have PJM in Northern Illinois, which is ComEd territory. In Central and Southern Illinois, we have MISO, M-I-S-O, which is the Midwest ISO, which is a ginormous ISO as well. Are things significantly different in PJM and MISO?
Yes. I mean, the rules are different for who can compete and how and where. And I mean, one big difference is that in PJM, like I said, most of the states in PJM use competitive retail electric supply for retail customers. In MISO, that is flipped, and it's almost all vertically integrated utilities in MISO. So the market, the energy market, while they do have energy and capacity markets in MISO, they're much less robust. Not as there are more transactions between big players going on in the MISO markets, whereas in PJM it's a there's a lot more players, and it's a pretty solid market.
Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily an advantage for us to be a deregulated state. Of course, it does create competition, and so in theory, it's good for consumers.
Yeah, I mean, I would point out, like, we talked, and it's relevant to the discussion that we will get to about whether the Midwest is a good market. Like in the Midwest, we've been blessed with low electricity prices compared to the rest of the country, and especially compared to big states. So, we pay less in the Midwest than we do generally in the Northeast, and definitely in the West, California especially.
And that is partially why renewables have been slow to come to the Midwest, because if the cost of energy is 20 cents a kWh and you put a solar array online, you can get more for that solar power than here in Illinois, where my commercial customers are paying perhaps 3 cents and change for grid power. And while at a large scale, of course, we see these very large PPAs for solar and storage now happening in the 2 to 3 cent range on a regular basis, right? So these clean energy is competitive at scale, but for DG, for distributed generation, which for all intents and purposes, I'm talking about a megawatt and down, and then commercial industrial, rooftop solar, community solar, and then residential solar. And that model is good in general, right? Because it covers the spectrum of consumers, businesses, and then utility. And then we have true utility scale happening, and we can talk about that, because there is an explosion of utility scale happening in the Midwest. We have a robust DG market here in Illinois and in Minnesota. We, let's get into some of the nitty gritties though of FEJA and where it's falling short, and kind of how you see us or see the state springboarding off of FEJA into FEJA Part 2, what for lack of a better expression, FEJA Part 2. Who knows what exactly that legislation will be called. There's several bills that have already been introduced in Springfield, but the governor's office, by dropping this report, has made it clear that this is going to be comprehensive, methodical, and not just a quick fix, so to speak, even though we in the industry would very much want a quick fix. Comprehensive legislation is a very good thing if it's done well. So jumpstarting, greenfield markets like Illinois, we got something called RECs, renewable energy credits, right, through FEJA. One REC is 1 megawatt hour of electricity generated by a renewable energy facility. And then the IPA puts a price on those RECs, and away we go, right? And we saw this truly is a good incentive. The developers rushed into Illinois from all corners of the United States, and of course, those of us like Continental, the installers just grabbed onto that, and we're growing at a tremendous rate. But those RECs are limited in quantity. So for example, in Illinois, we have about $200 to $230 million a year flowing into the REC pot. This is a small fee on your power bill. If you're in Illinois and you're in ComEd, Ameren, or Mid-American, look on your power bill and you will see. So this is not a tax. It is a fee that's collected by the utilities, and then it's paid out to system owners. And it's not all roses though, right? In community solar, for example, there were 700 more projects developed than there were enough RECs. And then they held a lottery, and that was pretty sour apples, because that's just a bit of a game of Russian roulette. At the end of the day, we are getting 111 community solar projects built this year and next year. And that's a great thing. And then lots of residential and commercial solar as well. So FEJA was good, but Anthony Starr said himself on this show that FEJA is not going to get us to 25% by 2025. The governor's report analysis is that we have reached about 7% renewables on the grid to date. Most of that is wind power because wind was the first to get a start in Illinois about 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago. When I first moved from Chicago to Central Illinois, the wind farms started coming. So, Will, what is your assessment of where FIJA fell down and what should be included in FIJA Part 2?
Yeah, so I would start off by saying I think FIJA was a major move. It was a big move for the state. It was an important move for the state, and it succeeded in achieving what we wanted it to do, which was get it started. I think there was always sort of an understanding that it was not going to be enough. We didn't have enough in FIJA, and we didn't have enough funding in FIJA to get us to the 2025 goals, but I think there was an understanding that we're going to need to do something else, and I think that understanding is still there. And so whether it's the Clean Jobs Coalition bill or PATH, which is the industry bill, or whatever, I think there's consensus that we need to keep the ball rolling on distributed generation, and then also really ramp up the big scale solar, the utility scale solar, if we're going to meet those goals. It's not too late to it might be a little late to hit 2025, but if we were able to get a bill going this year, we could get back on the path to doing that. I think there is consensus on the broad strokes of what we need to do to hit the governor's carbon goals. And I think that there is even more consensus than people think between different parties that are currently at the table with the governor to move forward. And it's just a matter of political inertia to get there. I do think we are going to get a bill. I hope this fall. John can talk a lot more about this than I will, and I just, my role in the legislative stuff at this point is more advisory on some of the technical issues rather than participating, with in the working groups. John is doing that, so you can talk to him more about that. But we're going to get a bill, and the question is going to be whether, if it's this year, if we can do something this fall, then we could start moving some money out the door to sort of keep momentum going. As you pointed out, with the adjustable block program, the awards that were made last year, the construction of those projects, especially in the community solar, it takes a while to get projects put together. Once you get a RAC award, right, you still have financing, and we talked about this previously, like procurement, get everything lined up, get permits so that you can build those things. That building is going to be happening this year and a little bit next year. If we can get a bill passed, then I think you can be in a situation where there'll at least be some continuity for industry participants that have spent time and resources and foregone opportunities in other states to set up in Illinois. And I think it's been a huge disservice that the state has sort of failed to deliver on the promise of keeping that going. But I think we're close, and it's very regrettable that we haven't been able to have a continuous program like the adjustable block program was designed to be. But we're all trying our hardest to keep it moving, and I think it will. And we're just, at this point, we're just trying to minimize the damage of the gap between the procurement last year and when the next distributed generation procurement happens.
Right. The so-called funding cliff is imminent and real, and today we can tell our customers that they will eventually get RECs, but we don't know exactly when and at what value. And so that uncertainty just creates uncertainty. And solar is very new in the Midwest. So there's a lot of education that's required. People don't see it in the landscape. Now, luckily, that is going to change as all of these feature projects come online. And in 10 years, we'll all have a battery in our garage, and many of us will have a solar array on our roof if we have a sunny roof, or we'll be subscribers to community solar if we don't have a sunny roof, or if we don't want to buy solar or can't afford it. Community solar is a great solution for that. We're starting to get some questions from the audience. I want to encourage people to type your questions into the question tool there, and then we can knock those off as appropriate. Mark asks, can you discuss the status of energy storage and value of solar in the regulatory process in the Midwest states that Boat Solar is active in?
Well, I'll start in Illinois because I think that's an interesting one, and it's current. So in FIJA, you know, as everyone knows, we have this. One of the things was there's this sunsetting for retail net metering when utilities hit 5% of penetration, and the question about how you measure that penetration level is an active one at the Illinois Commerce Commission right now. But we're proceeding under the assumption that, especially in Ameren service territory, we could hit that 5% threshold very soon. And according to Ameren and the commission, we've already hit the 3% threshold that triggered this DG rebate investigation. So what will happen when we hit 5% is that retail net metering will sunset, will end, and it will be replaced by this rebate that is intended to provide benefits for compensation to owners for the lost delivery services credits. So, you know, we've talked about this competitive market in Illinois where you have the energy supply on one side of your bill and the delivery services on the other side of the bill. Energy supply will continue to be, you know, continue to be able to offset those costs directly. And since those are generally kilowatt hour costs, it's more, you know, if you generate and don't use a kilowatt of electricity in your business or commercial or industrial customer, then you just don't buy that from the areas, and so that's pretty straightforward. That you're going to continue to get that offset benefit, but delivery services credits that are usually based on either demand charges or, you know, kilowatt hour bills or fixed charges, you don't offset. So this DG rebate that commercial customers are already getting, $250 a kilowatt. The commission let me back up a little bit more. The commission has initiated an investigation pursuant to the FIJA to investigate the value of distributed generation to the distribution system. And that proceeding has already started. We've intervened in it along with the LPC. NRDC has intervened sort of alongside us on that one. And the joint solar parties have intervened in it, and the Attorney General's intervened in it. And basically this investigation that the commission is conducting right now is intended to sort of determine what is the value of distributed resources to the distribution grid, right? As opposed to like leaving aside energy. This is just on the delivery services side of the bill. And Ameren's proposed, so Ameren was the first one in on this. They hit the threshold and it triggered this investigation. And Ameren's proposed a very limited definition of what the value distributed resources will have on the grid, and it's very locational specific, and it's going to end up providing little or no value to most customers going forward. What we're going to be coming in with, and our testimony is due on this in the middle of I think September 25th is the date I have in my mind, but it's plus or minus 10 days. You know, we'll be proposing that they should be using a fairly broader definition of what distributed resources mean when they're trying to figure out what the value of DER to the grid, and so that would include storage, right? And so if you have a, let's talk commercial facilities. If you have a 250 kW system on your roof, and you've also got a 100 kWh battery, you can change the way that customer's load shape is in a way that can have dramatic benefits for the distribution grid. And so all that's to say that we are trying to get that considered in the DG rebate thing. And I think that's the central avenue for storage to see some value in Illinois. There's not, if we want to talk about different states, or I don't know if you want to dig in on that a little bit more. I mean, which way do you want to go?
Yeah, and I'll just point out that the governor's report does have a point on within item 3, the renewable energy piece. It says facilitate deployment of energy storage systems and establish an energy storage program. There are states, California, New York, Massachusetts, to name a few, that have explicit incentives for storage. An anecdote on storage for our listeners. I am developing a project in Northern Illinois in PJM. It's a 2 megawatt AC solar and storage project. We're pairing a 2 megawatt AC solar array with a 2.5 megawatt battery. Solar alone ROIs to the tune of about $4 to $5 million after 20 years for this customer. It's a very nice deal. It's cash positive in 5 years. You add the storage though, and the ROI is $25 million over 20 years. You can do so many different things with batteries. In this case, we're attacking capacity charges. We're doing frequency regulation, which is a grid service. It provides backup power, of course, but the value stack of storage is different in every ISO, in every region, every state. So you have to be very careful, and it's deep water. But in any case, we do have a federal incentive also, right, for storage right now, and that is the ITC, the investment tax credit, which is currently 26%. It is slated to step down to 22%. But if you pair storage with your solar project, you can use the ITC on the storage element. And so that helps reduce the capital expense on the front end. I like to say that everybody wants a battery until they see the price tag. So, but what's going on with storage in other states? It's TBD really how Illinois is going to do this. It's great that the governor is earmarking it and acknowledging that this is a thing. They're also earmarking electrification of transportation, putting a stake in the ground saying, we are going to be a leader. And they specifically call out manufacturing. Okay, we have Rivian in Bloomington Normal, which is going to be a major EV manufacturer, hopefully. They're not putting any cars on the streets just yet, but crossing fingers. And so what is going on though in other Midwestern states when it comes to storage? Noteworthy in this is those IRPs are often mentioning storage now, right? When NIPSCO issued their RFP in 2018, it explicitly asked for proposals on solar storage or wind and storage, right?
Yeah.
And that's because batteries are like power plants. They're not infinite. They have a store of energy that can be then used and dispatched 24/7. So what's going on in the Midwest with storage?
So first of all, I mean, I think everywhere where people are building utility scale stuff now, especially stuff that's being proposed now, as opposed to stuff that's already been, built into modeling. That trend again is, I think, the very most recent example of this at the utility scale. They're building 700, like I said, 1.1 gigawatts of solar plus storage, and they are pairing. There's some solar only parts of that, but I think most of that they're planning to be solar plus storage, and so and they are going to use that to shape the the profile of the generating profile of the resources to meet the needs of their particular grid, right? At the distributed scale, like you pointed out, there's a lot of different things in the value stack that you can do. The frequency regulation and the sort of rate arbitrage that you mentioned are two ways, and I would consider those both on sort of the resource side of it, and then what I was talking about is on the distribution system grid side, right? So that if you can avoid doing major distribution system upgrades like substation replacements or replacing parts of the distribution system lines or transformers that would otherwise have to be upgraded. If you can offset that or defer having to do that with by changing the load profile of the distribution circuit with a solar plus some sort of storage as that is programmed to offset, to discharge at certain times of the day, then you can have huge distribution system benefits. So how you stack those all up depend on what are the opportunities available to you based on your state incentives or your state rate structures and state programs that you have to support those, and the RTO, and at the resource level, how your RTO does that. So, you could, like, I know, Continental Electric is one of the first in the region to have this your frequency regulation thing on your own building. I think that was hugely exciting. And like, what was that, 2016 or?
Oh, I
I don't
think the
remember when it
battery
went
went
live.
in 2014 or 2015.
Yeah, I mean, it was early on, and
Mm-hmm.
at the time the frequency regulation market was a very rich and exciting market. Turned out, it levelized out a little bit, but it's still a thing that you can participate in. But and you can also do rate arbitrage if the differential between your highest rates and your lowest rates is enough that you can store some energy that you produce during the very the low, either when you're generating a lot or when rates are low, and then use it when rates are high. And then you also mentioned peak load capacity management. Like, that's a huge part of any commercial industrial customer's energy bill. So, but then you add other things in there, like if you have aggregation and you have ability to participate in capacity markets, or in or actually, in California, there's a company called Ohm Connect that is using aggregated distributed resources to participate in energy markets in the active, the locational marginal price markets. So there's all kinds of different things that you can do with storage, but you have to have the structures in place to make that possible. And again, in the Midwest, we're sort of lagging. We don't have those structures in place. California and New York, you mentioned, there's actual incentives that the state was making the utilities offer to customers to install the storage, and they the use case for why that storage was put in was less clear. Like, the utilities have some ability to call those resources at different times, but they're not really fully leveraging the ability of the resources to meet the real-time demands that the grid's putting on, or the real-time demands that are out there that could be met with distributed resources. So we're trying to figure that out. In Illinois, we have this DG rebate provision. Maybe we can get some of those concepts of non-wireless alternatives as a potential benefit that could be met by distributed resources that include storage. Other states in the Midwest are sort of lagging. Like, we don't really have very good visibility on where those programs are gonna go. The opportunities for energy arbitrage and increasing self-consumption are there in structures that are like in Michigan right now for small customers. They have this DG rebate, or they have this distributed generation tariff program. And so there's a differential between what customers get for the outflow from their systems and what they get for their, what they're offsetting when they're self-consuming energy. So there's this, but the differential is not big enough to justify storage on its own right now. So, but if you had time of use rates, which Michigan is moving toward, and you have highly differentiated time of use rates that really recognize the difference between energy at summer peaks and energy at off-peak periods, then you could potentially get to the point where that storage becomes viable in its own right without programs or incentives.
We have a question from Anonymous about co-ops. Historically, co-ops have discouraged customers from using solar. That is the case in many of the Illinois co-ops. They tend to have very restrictive rules and limits. For example, some arbitrarily say, we're going to limit you to 10 kW. There's also initiatives where they limit the percentage of solar on the grid in their territory to some very small fraction. What is being done to improve the ability of muni and co-op customers to implement solar?
That is a great question, but I'm afraid I don't have a very good answer for it. I mean, munis and co-ops are, self-regulating, self-governing entities, and they sort of make their own rules. We don't have, in Illinois, whenever they've tried to address that legislatively, they just get a lot of pushback from rural communities. They don't like it. I would like to see, the state take a more active stance on that, but it's politically difficult. That would be more of a question for John than me, though.
There are co-ops in Wisconsin that have invested heavily in solar. And
right.
So it's not all co-ops across the board, it's some co-ops. And but look to Wisconsin, just Google that, you'll find a ton of pretty sizable, I mean, they're utilities, right? So they need sizable projects. But these are anything from 5 to a couple hundred megawatts.
Yeah.
There's a spectrum.
Yeah, Dairyland Power Cooperative in Maryland in particular, or in Wisconsin in particular, is been very aggressive with building out utility scale resources. And they're a what's called a GNT cooperative, so generation transmission. So they provide generation and transmission services to the smaller local co-ops, and so the smaller local co-ops buy generation transmission services from them. And Dairyland, again, it's another example of a large resource provider that's taken a look at it and figured out that the cheapest path forward for them is solar. And so that's the path that they went, and they've gone whole hog into it. I mean, really have done a lot to provide the cheapest energy for their customers, and that's solar right now.
Yeah. We just have a few minutes left. I want to talk about two things in particular. Rex asks about federal legislation, and in light of this being an election year and the Biden campaign having come out with an infrastructure plan, they want to invest $2 trillion in the clean energy transition. It's going to take more than 2 trillion. It's going to take at least 3 trillion. Of course, the question is by when. And but anyway, how do things change if we had more leadership at the federal level?
So vote solar's, one of the premises of what we do is that we need to make things change at the states, and that's really where the action is. That said, I do think we need to have some federal leadership on clean energy, which we don't have right now. Yeah, I don't have much insight in that. We spend our time trying to make change at the state level, because that's where a lot of these decisions are made, and especially in the vertically integrated states. I mean, all these decisions are made based on, and the other thing is, I think at this point in time in the history of our industry, the worm is turned, and clean energy is the more cost-effective alternative. It's not, it frustrates me when we talk about how much money we're going to have to spend to make clean energy transition. Like, it's the cheapest way to provide energy at this point. We need to move things out of the way. We need to move structures and past investments out of the way to make it possible to do the transition. We don't need to just be throwing money at the problem necessarily.
Right. And then broadly here in the Midwest, we have great DG markets in Illinois and Minnesota, and hopefully we can keep that train rolling here with new legislation in the fall to augment our RPS. But barring that, let's talk a little more broadly about the Midwest. What do you see happening when it comes to renewables? And, you can talk about Michigan, but Indiana, Ohio.
There's a lot of opportunity out there, and while energy prices are low, distribution system costs are going up, and if we can find ways to unlock the value of distributed resources, other than just energy, like if we can sort of recognize the full value of distributed resources, I think that there's we're hitting that tipping point in this region where it will make sense for way more customers than it currently does. And so I think it's just a little bit of patience and being creative about the business models that people use to try to get these resources deployed.
The thing that I see is there's a tremendous amount of utility scale solar happening in the Midwest. Both MISO and PJM have dozens of gigawatts. I think there's over 60 gigawatts of solar in the MISO queue. Only a percentage of that is going to actually go to construction, but even if it's 20%, that would be a huge amount of solar construction in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And Illinois is part of that mix. We are getting upwards of 600 megawatts of utility scale solar in the next 12 to 24 months under FEJA.
Yeah.
So, well, I need to make a few announcements. I want to remind our listeners that you can find all of our work here at SolarWorks for Illinois on YouTube. And so if you just search on CES NRG in YouTube, I'm going to share my screen briefly and show you the channel there. So I am now producing 2 videos a week, one interview like this, and then I've started a new segment called the Clean Power Hour with John Weaver, who is a seasoned journalist and also a solar installer. So please check that out. We also do these pre-announced events, and our September event is with Chris Connell, who is the National Technical Sales Advisor for Fronius. Fronius is a major inverter manufacturer. The inverter is the device that converts the DC to the AC on the solar array. So it's a critical piece of electronics, and there's a lot going on with rapid shutdown and solar safety. So we'll be drilling into that with Chris. Will, unfortunately, we're at the end of our time. I want to thank you and all of our listeners for supporting the show. Best of luck to you as you bring FIJA 2.0 to Illinois. We're grateful for all your work, and let's do this again.
Yeah, it was fun, and I appreciate the chance to, chat with you about it. I love talking about this. I love talking about this transition stuff. It's important, and it's a big opportunity for us. And I just think we need to be patient and keep pushing hard. Everyone pushing together.
Thank you, Will Kenworthy with Vote Solar. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Let's grow solar and have a great day.
Bye-bye.